Imagine a galaxy where the Jedi, guardians of peace and justice, chose a path of power, a path fueled not by compassion but by fear, anger, and domination. What if, in the desperation to win the Clone Wars, the Jedi embraced the very darkness they swore to fight? Would it bring victory or destroy them from within? The Jedi, once unwavering in their dedication to peace and selflessness, begin to question their approach as the Clone Wars drag on. The endless conflict, the countless losses, and the overwhelming power of the Separatists force them to reconsider their philosophy. They realize that their usual methods, relying solely on discipline, control, and restraint, are no longer enough to secure victory. The Jedi are becoming desperate. The war has taken a toll on their ranks, and the galaxy's future seems increasingly uncertain. In their pursuit of an elusive peace, they start to entertain the idea that perhaps the dark side, which they've always condemned, holds the power they need to win. This is no simple decision. It's a shift in everything they stand for, an acceptance that to defeat an enemy fueled by fear and anger, they might need to channel those very emotions themselves. At first, it's only a handful of Jedi Masters, those who've seen the brutality of the war up close and who feel the weight of the Republic's collapse on their shoulders. They begin experimenting with the dark side, using it to enhance their strength, speed, and perception in battle. They don't fully embrace it, not yet, but they acknowledge its potential. As the Jedi start to harness these forbidden powers, they become more efficient, more ruthless, and most importantly, more effective on the battlefield. Their lightsabers glow brighter with rage, and their force abilities extend beyond what they ever thought possible. The lines between good and evil blur as the Jedi begin to realize that their enemies are using the very tactics they once condemned. The war is pushing them to the edge, and now they find themselves standing at a crossroads. Will they continue down the path of honor, or will they take the risk of embracing the darkness for the sake of victory? In this moment, the Jedi are forever changed. Mace Windu, a Jedi Master known for his unwavering discipline, would become the most pivotal figure in this altered timeline. His combat style, Vapad, which bordered on the dark side, would now be adopted by every Jedi in the galaxy. This form, a deadly dance that allowed Windu to channel his own emotions without succumbing to them, became the foundation of the Jedi's new approach to warfare. As the war escalated, the Jedi realized that in order to defeat the relentless Separatist forces, they needed more than just mastery of the light side. They needed the strength and aggression that came from the dark side. Vapad was more than a fighting technique. It was a philosophy. It required its practitioner to harness their emotions, even the darkest ones, without letting them control their actions. It allowed the Jedi to channel rage, fear, and anger into their strikes, creating an unprecedented combat effectiveness. With Vapad, the Jedi no longer fought with hesitation or restraint. Every blow was delivered with lethal precision, every maneuver calculated with deadly intent. The Jedi became warriors in the truest sense, no longer bound by their traditional codes but by the harsh realities of war. Mace Windu, as the one who mastered Vapad, would naturally lead this new generation of Jedi warriors. He would become the symbol of the Order's transformation, part philosopher, part conqueror. His influence on the Jedi would be undeniable, and under his guidance they would be reshaped from mere defenders of peace to instruments of victory at any cost. The galaxy would see a different side of the Jedi, one not just capable of wielding the light, but of using the very darkness they once opposed. And, as they did, they would find themselves walking a fine line, one that would push them closer to the edge of what it means to truly be Jedi. It would be a war fought with new rules. Rules that might ultimately prove too dangerous to uphold. As the Jedi embraced the dark side, Anakin Skywalker, who had long struggled with his emotions, found himself fully unleashed. No longer bound by the Jedi code, he could now channel his anger, fear, and hatred into a powerful, unrestrained force. The very traits the Jedi had once warned him against became his greatest strengths. He no longer needed to hide his attachment to Padme, or his fear of losing those he loved. Those emotions now fueled him. In the heat of battle, Anakin's already formidable abilities were amplified beyond anything he had ever imagined. With the dark side at his command, he was able to dominate his enemies in ways that even the most skilled Sith Lords could not predict. His mastery over the Force was undeniable. His speed, strength, and power on the battlefield were unmatched. He tore through Separatist forces with ruthless precision, his lightsaber strikes more lethal and his telekinetic abilities more destructive. He was a whirlwind of dark energy, a force of nature that left destruction in his wake. But it wasn't just his combat skills that grew. Anakin's confidence surged as he embraced the darker aspects of the Force. He became more self-assured, more decisive, and more willing to act without hesitation. The war seemed to turn in his favor, as the Jedi now had a weapon the Sith could not counter. His tactical brilliance, enhanced by the dark side, allowed him to outmaneuver even the most seasoned military leaders. He no longer had to question the morality of his actions. The ends justified the means. However, this newfound power didn't come without its cost. The more he began to lose sight of his original purpose, his heart, once filled with hope and idealism, started to darken, and he began to question not only the war but his place in the galaxy. Would this power truly bring him peace, or would it, in the end, consume him? Darth Sidious, the master manipulator, had always counted on the Jedi's strict adherence to the light side to secure his reign. He had spent years weaving his web of deceit, pulling strings from the shadows, turning the galaxy against the Jedi while manipulating Anakin Skywalker as his secret weapon. But when the Jedi made the unprecedented decision to embrace the dark side, everything changed. Sidious had anticipated their reluctance, their fear of falling to the darkness. What he didn't expect was their boldness in using it against him. The Jedi, now empowered by the raw energy of the dark side, became more than just soldiers. They became a true threat. Palpatine had long relied on his ability to control the Jedi through their weaknesses. His dark influence over Anakin had been the key to his plans, keeping the Chosen One on the path to destruction. But, with the Jedi fully embracing the powers of the dark side, they were no longer the easy targets he had believed them to be. The Jedi were now willing to embrace fear, anger, and hatred in ways they never had before. Their once pure intent was now sharpened, and they wielded their new powers with a precision that Sidious hadn't anticipated. The Sith Lord, caught off guard by the sudden surge of power from the Jedi, found himself on the defensive. No longer were they meekly following the rules of engagement he had set. The Jedi used the dark side to overwhelm his plans, turning his tactics back on him. Anakin, who had once been Sidious's greatest weapon, now fought alongside his fellow Jedi, his fury no longer a tool for the Sith but a weapon against them. Sidious's reign, built on manipulation and subtlety, crumbled as the Jedi used the very darkness he had mastered against him. The galaxy, which had teetered on the edge of his control, suddenly felt more uncertain than ever. In their pursuit of victory, the Jedi had given Sidious a taste of his own medicine, and the consequences were dire. As the Jedi embraced the dark side, their fighting tactics became more aggressive, relentless, and calculated. Count Dooku, a former Jedi himself, once stood as a powerful figure in the galaxy, but as the Jedi adapt to the darkness within them, Dooku's carefully crafted strategies begin to unravel. His once imposing mastery over the Force, his manipulation of the Separatists, and his ability to stay several steps ahead of the Jedi are no longer enough. Dooku had always relied on his calm demeanor and wisdom, using subtlety and strategy to outmaneuver his enemies. He was a master at playing the long game, but now, with the Jedi tapping into the very power he once wielded, his finesse becomes ineffective against their brutal efficiency. They no longer need to meditate or control their anger. They embrace it as a source of power. The Jedi are now unpredictable, relentless, and aggressive. Every attack, every maneuver carries the weight of a sudden, overwhelming assault. The darkness has changed them. No longer bound by the principles of restraint, they strike first, and they strike hard. Where once Dooku could play on their honor and idealism, now their ruthlessness turns the tables. The Jedi swarm him in battle, each one a fierce, unyielding force. They no longer fight with the careful elegance of their old ways, but with the raw intensity of the dark side. Dooku's greatest strength, the subtlety of his Sith teachings, becomes his greatest vulnerability. In a universe now ruled by brute strength and unchecked emotions, he finds himself outmatched. The very tools that once made him a feared figure are now wielded by those he once saw as noble warriors, and in the end, they overwhelm him. The Sith Lord, once so certain of his position, falls to the might of the Jedi, now transformed by their own darkness. And just like that, the war shifts again. The transformation of the Jedi into figures of dark power did not go unnoticed by the clone troopers. These soldiers, bred for battle and bound by loyalty to the Republic, were trained to follow orders without question. But now, as the Jedi began wielding dark side abilities with cold precision, the clones found themselves at a crossroads. The very beings they once saw as noble leaders now seemed like something else entirely. warriors driven by fear and aggression. The Jedi's new tactics weren't just different, they were unsettling. Where once there had been an unwavering commitment to protecting life, now there was only victory at any cost. As the Jedi's methods grew more brutal, the clones began to see them not as the champions of justice, but as just another faction in the war, willing to do whatever it took to crush their enemies. The lines between the Republic and the Separatists blurred for the first time, and the clones struggled to reconcile the Jedi's new role in the conflict. Clone troopers like Captain Rex and Cody, who had once been steadfast in their belief in the Jedi, now questioned the wisdom of following their orders. Some began to wonder if the Jedi, in their pursuit of victory, were becoming as dangerous as the very enemies they had sworn to defeat. Doubt spread like wildfire within the ranks, as whispers of the Jedi's changing nature reached every corner of the battlefield. The soldiers had been bred for loyalty, but what happened when that loyalty was tested by the very people they were sworn to serve? For some, the decision to question the Jedi wasn't easy. They had fought alongside these men and women for years, and the bond they shared was forged in the fires of war. But as the Jedi turned increasingly to the dark side, the clones realized they were no longer fighting for peace. They were fighting for control, and that made all the difference. This shift in perspective would change the course of the war, and in many ways the future of the galaxy itself. As the Jedi Order embraced the dark side, Obi-Wan Kenobi found himself in an increasingly difficult position. He had always been a staunch believer in balance, both within himself and in the Force. His mentor, Qui-Gon Jinn, had instilled in him the importance of following the will of the Force, but never at the cost of personal integrity. However, as the Jedi began to wield the dark side in their fight against the Separatists, Obi-Wan began to question everything he held dear. The Jedi were no longer the protectors of peace. They had become warriors, using anger, fear, and aggression to defeat their enemies. Anakin, his former Padawan, was now a powerful agent of the dark side, his emotions no longer something to be controlled, but something to be used to fuel his power. Obi-Wan saw the transformation in his friend. Once the hope of the Jedi, now a weapon of rage. Yet he couldn't help but feel that the Jedi's shift toward the dark side was pushing him closer to that very precipice. Obi-Wan knew he could not ignore the change. His heart ached as he watched the Jedi he had once respected fall deeper into the shadows. Yoda's warnings echoed in his mind. The dark side was seductive, and once they allowed themselves to walk its path, it would be almost impossible to return. And yet, in the heat of the war, there were victories to be had, lives to be saved. But the price for those victories was steep, and Obi-Wan could feel it every time he raised his saber or used the dark side to strike down his foes. The battle for the soul of the Jedi was no longer just about defeating the Sith. It was a struggle for Obi-Wan's own soul, and with each passing day, he wasn't sure which side he was truly on anymore. Would he be able to stay true to the values that had once defined him? Or would he too succumb to the dark allure of power? In the end, Obi-Wan could only wonder, was this the path to victory, or the beginning of their ultimate downfall? Yoda, the oldest and wisest of the Jedi, feels the disturbance in the Force like never before. His senses, always attuned to the subtle balance between light and dark, now struggle to find clarity. As the Jedi adopt more aggressive and forceful tactics, Yoda's heart grows heavy with doubt. The power they wield, once a tool for peace, has become something far more dangerous. While the Jedi are winning battles across the galaxy, Yoda knows that something essential is slipping away. The Force is not meant to be wielded like a weapon, but in the hands of the Jedi it's no longer a subtle guidance, it's a brutal force of destruction. Their embrace of the dark side, no matter how strategic, disturbs the natural flow of the universe, and Yoda feels it in his very soul. The darkness creeping into their ranks isn't just dangerous, it's contagious. The Jedi were meant to protect, not to dominate, and yet, as the war drags on, Yoda watches them lose sight of their true purpose. His connection to the Force grows strained, as if the universe itself is holding its breath, unsure of what path the Jedi will walk. The light is still there, but it feels dimmer with each passing day, overshadowed by the growing shadow of their own choices. Yoda tries to warn them, but his voice is drowned out by the urgency of war. He is torn between his duty to the Republic and his duty to preserve the sanctity of the Force. The Jedi may win the war, but at what cost? In trying to preserve the galaxy, they risk losing themselves, and Yoda fears that the price they'll pay may be greater than any battle they've fought. And so, Yoda watches, knowing that the future of the Jedi Order and perhaps the entire galaxy now hangs in the balance. As the Jedi embraced the dark side to win the Clone Wars, something began to shift in the galaxy. The distinction between Jedi and Sith, once clear and absolute, started to fade. With their new methods, the Jedi were no longer seen as noble warriors fighting for peace. Instead, they became feared enforcers, wielding their power without the restraint that once defined them. The Sith, once the only practitioners of the dark side, were now no longer the sole architects of fear and anger. The Jedi, by adopting these very traits, began to mirror the darkness they had spent centuries opposing. In the hearts and minds of the galaxy's citizens, the line between good and evil blurred. The Jedi, once symbols of hope, were now increasingly viewed as cold and calculating, willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The Sith, for their part, had retreated not because they were defeated, but because their methods had been co-opted by the very order meant to stop them. The galaxy's perception shifted, and the people who once stood by the Jedi now questioned if they were any better than the Sith themselves. Anakin, once the shining hope of the Jedi Order, now found himself at the center of this transformation. His passion, once suppressed as a weakness, became the fuel that powered the Jedi's new approach. He, more than anyone, understood how easily one could slip into the shadows, and yet he reveled in it. The power was intoxicating, and in the process the Sith began to lose their place in the galaxy's narrative. They were no longer the masters of the dark side, merely shadows in a galaxy now consumed by their own darkness. Victory had come at an enormous cost, not just the destruction of the Sith, but the very soul of the Jedi. They had won the war, but in doing so they had erased the line that separated them from those they had sworn to destroy. The Clone Wars, once a battle for survival, now comes to a chilling close, but victory feels hollow. The Jedi have triumphed, yet the galaxy is left in ruins, and the cost of their actions is clearer than ever. They have wiped out the Separatist forces, crushed the remnants of the Sith, and brought an end to the war that ravaged the galaxy for so long. But what is peace when it comes at the price of everything the Jedi stood for? In their rise to power, the Jedi have abandoned their core principles, embracing the very darkness they once vowed to resist. The people of the galaxy no longer see them as noble protectors, they see them as ruthless enforcers. The Jedi, once symbols of hope, are now feared, their every move calculated in cold precision. The Republic, now ruled by Jedi warriors more akin to Sith lords, is held together by fear, not respect. Despite their military victories, there is no celebration in the streets, no sense of triumph among the people. Instead, there is unease, for the Jedi's presence now casts a long shadow. They are not the guardians of peace they once were. They are the ones who have brought the galaxy to the brink of despair. The people whisper about the old days, when Jedi were keepers of peace, not conquerors of war. As the Jedi struggle to hold on to their power, cracks begin to form. The clone troopers, once loyal soldiers, now question their orders, seeing their commanders not as heroes but as tyrants. The resistance movements, once scattered and weak, now rise up against the Jedi, fighting for freedom from their oppressive rule. Victory was never supposed to feel like this. The Jedi may have won the war, but they have lost their way. Their commitment to the light is a distant memory, and they are left to wonder if they have truly secured the galaxy's future or doomed it to a new age of darkness. The Jedi now face a far greater challenge than the one posed by the Sith. They must reckon with the power they've taken on and the price that comes with it.